Welcome to the HBCU podcast. You're listening to episode 43. If you're an avid listener or just joining us for the first time, here we're joined by some awesome HBCU grads in the form of co-host and guest. We also focus on all the great things HBCU alumni are doing all over the world. On this episode, we speak with Dr. Eve Hudson. She's a graduate of Shaw University. Dr. Eve is the founder and chief strategist of The Purpose Professor. She's a podcast host, motivational speaker, and author. Her lively personality and brilliant insight can be heard on her very own podcast, First Gen Lounge. During this episode, we discuss her HBCU experience, her career transition, and why she's on a mission to inspire, empower, and uplift First Gens. Keep listening. It's the HBCU podcast.
Hi, I am Eve Hudson. I am a 2009 graduate of Shaw University.
Awesome. Okay. So again, thank you for being here. I'm going to start off and tell everybody how, I guess we met or how we came to run up on each other and get, this whole podcast thing happening. So you guys, I am a low-key stalker and... And I was in the Raleigh area for just a little while, and one of my sorors invited me to the Poets in Autumn tour. And because I'm always on Instagram, and I follow a bunch of people just between the two accounts I manage, my account and then the HBCU podcast, I'm always like stalking HBCU grads. And so I started to follow Dr. Eve, and social media will think you know people, like, For real.
That's a fact. It will.
It will make you feel like you know people. So I roll up on her at this event and I'm like, hey, you're Dr. Eve, right? I'm Natasha. I follow you on IG. You have to be on my podcast. And she was so nice, so gracious. And, you didn't seem like you're a creep at all. You didn't seem like you were looking at me like you're a creep. You just were really nice. And so I'm glad we finally were able to make this happen.
Yeah, me too. It is so funny. It is so funny because I am like you, and I be hoping people don't think I'm weird, because here's my thing. We're on social media because it's a part of being social and not just on my phone. But if I see you, I want to connect with you. I want to engage with you. And if you put yourself out there, you're saying you want to be met. So, that's my thinking. So let's meet.
Right.
So it was really cool. So yes, but thank you for having me here. And thank you for the audacity to walk up to me and say something, because you could have been like, I'm just going to hit her up later on Instagram and be like, I saw you. So thank you for doing that.
You're welcome. See, that seems like the creepier approach.
Right. Hey, but sometimes you just miss people. I'm just saying.
That's true. So I was like, let's just take this time and say hello because, So tell us where you're from and what led you to Shaw.
All right. So I am from the great city of Charlotte, North Carolina. Natives are like 704, so that's the clean, actually 704, so I really born now, so I'm a native, like not Gastonia Concord, just got to make that clear.
Okay.
But love being from Charlotte because it's a city that really did so much for me in terms of what it gave me that I didn't recognize that it gave me as a youngster. So I did grow up in an environment that I hate for people to say, to talk about the struggle, but one that was of struggle, ended up being in a single parent home and really had the extended family to love on me and help nurture me through life. Mm-hmm. And it was my grandfather actually who kept telling me to go to school one day. But fast forward, to get to what led me to Shaw. I had a teacher in high school, who's no longer with us, but my history teacher actually. And we were talking about college, I want to say in the spring, when it was time to graduate, because I, first generation.
You don't know when to start.
Don't know where to start, what test to take, nothing to do. I knew that I did want to go to college, but it was still kind of weird because, the school after school, and, I'm thinking I'm going to stay at home. And he had me look at schools, online. He used to sit me down at the computer after school. He'd be like, look, while you finish with your little clubs and stuff, figure out what school you want to go to. He said, what do you want? And I kept saying, I really like where I am. I went to Harding University High School. I said, I really like the small environment. And he was like, hey, have you checked out Fisk? Have you checked out Shaw? Have you checked out Bennett? So he was the one who was telling me the schools. And ironically, he only told me HBCUs. And so I learned many years later that he actually was an HBCU graduate himself. He graduated from Central. And I remember going on to campus tours. And I went on my tours, I mean, literally like by myself. And I took a train up to Shaw. And an admissions counselor came to pick me up from the train station. They housed me overnight in one of the residence halls. Like, Shaw really went in. Like, they did that thing for me. And I happened to go on awards day, and I fell in love. And so of all the other schools that I looked at, because I did look at Spelman and, John C. Smith, Livingstone, there were schools that were on the list. Shaw won my heart, but it was the only place I truly felt like home. And so that's what led me there.
I've never heard anyone say, they kind of like, well, I've heard people say they've rolled out the red carpet, but admissions counselors meeting you and, kind of picking you up and then showing you around. That's really nice. I love when I hear that people have really cool stories about like what the hospitality was like when they actually got to their particular visits, if they had the, opportunity to do a visit.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, and that's what makes an HBCU, right? It's the feeling like family. And they showed me, you belong here. They weren't just talking. They made it happen, because here I was, again, a first generation college student, not knowing what the heck I'm doing. And they were guiding me through this process and saying, we get where you come from. They got it. And so because we get it, here we are to do what we need to do to make sure that you're good. And that was like a whoa. Yeah. Blew my mind.
I love that. They were really meeting you where you were. So once you got on the beautiful campus of Shaw University, what was your major there, and how did you choose or land on a major while you were at Shaw?
So this is actually funny. My major ended up being mass communications. And I was general at first, because you could take two tracks. You could either do journalism or broadcast. I thought that I was on the path to being a radio host. And so I wanted to be a, radio personality and do all the things with music and using my voice to motivate people. And what inspired that is a few years prior, when I was in school, I played football when I was in high school for like one fall. And I had gotten a couple of interviews, and one was on radio. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. I want to do this. And so when I went to school, I was like, I already know what I'm going to do. But then realized later on, in all transparency, that it wasn't the right major. And by that, while I love mass comedy, idea of being this host and personality, because I love music, I love talking to people. I wanted to have people hear my voice all over the place, and more so because I wanted to inspire people, not because I just wanted to do radio. So kind of looking at that, I just chose mass comm. And when I started getting tired of doing the broadcast stuff, I just switched and said, I'm just going to do journalism, because I love writing and I'm a poet and all these other stuff. So really had no practical reason for the mass comm beyond what would end up being the bigger goal, and that was actually speaking and writing through like books and motivational pieces, which I didn't need a mass comm degree for. So if I could have changed it, I would have gone the route of sociology. It was a more natural fit. I can't give it that, because I connected to the work because I was interested in it because of this news radio hosting kind of thing. So ironically, I'm actually using my degree now. I didn't use it for a long time, but doing the podcast that I have is actually allowed me to use a degree because I understand production. So I'm sure you get that as well. Yeah,
absolutely. As you said, you're able to use it a little bit more, but we want to talk a little bit about your career, because just reading your bio and just knowing you and knowing you on social media, I see that you are Dr. Eve, and you have spent quite a bit of time in higher education. So what initially drew you to working in higher education?
Oh man, when I left college, I never wanted to leave. So it was one of those things, not that I wanted to be an undergrad, but I, even as a college student, loved helping my peers, helping them to be successful, helping them to grow, wanting them to graduate, being a cheerleader, and realized that I wanted to be like the many HBCU professionals who were around me. I wanted to be that person that made a difference in a college student's life. And it was because my time at Shaw was so transformational for me. It's because it changed the trajectory of my life that I just wanted to do the same thing for other people who'd come from where I'd come from, or just in college in general. So I fell in love with college students as a college student. And it took a little time to really realize it or put my finger on what it was as higher education and student affairs, because that wasn't something we talked about as a track for going forward in graduate school.
Mm-hmm.
And even graduate school was a very tough conversation for me to have, because, and going again back to the first generation thing, I got this bachelor's. What's up? I'm doing it. Like I've done all that I need to do.
Right.
But it was like, no. There's so much more. And I'm like, so I really had to learn as I matriculated. But it was really my experience at Shaw and wanting to be that person.
Awesome. So in higher education, you mentioned student affairs, but have you taught? You've also worked as a professor. What were your various, roles in higher education?
Oh, look, what haven't I done? I have worked in Greek life. I worked in residence life. I've taught first year classes. I've done academic affairs in terms of curriculum development. I led a first year experience program. Minority student development, that was one of my favorites when I was in graduate school, actually. And as of right now, that's all that comes to mind, but there's a long list of things that I've done. Because I was really trying to find my fit
Mm-hmm.
in higher education, and I have had for a long time, I'm multi-passionate, so I've never wanted to just be in one place. And even having worked with student athletes, always trying to figure out what works, what feels natural. And it would be so many years later that teaching was the thing that actually brought me to life. It's the thing that had my spirit just on a high. And I couldn't tell you that I would have found that had I not ventured through all of the tracks that I'd taken. I just kind of would have maybe settled for something just because, this is right and this is what everybody expects from me. But teaching was definitely it for me. And I love teaching students, no matter if they're first year or if they're seniors, coming out. I love teaching students, teaching them not just, academic subjects, but teaching them about life.
Yeah. Well, it's cool that you were able to kind of like go through and see what really fit you, what you liked and you didn't like, and you got to do it and still earn a living. So that's always a plus.
Hey, amen.
So how did you transition? Because now everyone knows that you're an entrepreneur. So how did you go from higher education to entrepreneurship? Was that an easy transition for you to make? And how long have you been doing it?
Definitely wasn't an easy transition to make, but it was one that I made without a plan. Mm-hmm. I'll be very honest with you, because everybody's, I did this way. I always knew. No, not me. I actually, just trying to be fully transparent, because there are a lot of higher ed professionals who experience burnout and overwhelm and just kind of hit brick walls and need to take a break and step back, because higher ed is really amazing work, but it can be very demanding work as well. And so I got to a place where I needed to take some time off so I could heal myself physically, emotionally, and spiritually, because I just really had a lot going on in many aspects of my life. And so the transition for me was, I'm leaving higher ed for a little while. No, I don't know what in the world I'm going to do, but I'm going to take this opportunity to figure it out. I'll come back. I'll just take a year. Now, this is why I want to say thank God for husbands, or for those of you who have wives, for significant others. I was talking to my husband one day. I was like, hey, I think I just want to take some time off. And he was like, well, babe, whatever you want to do, I got you. And I'm like, all right. So you sure? He's like, yeah, I got you. So I left my last position in August of 2016, and 3 years later, I am still in entrepreneurship and continuing to grow. And even like I would tell people, find my voice and continue to try to do what I can to change the world.
So with your entrepreneurship, and it's awesome that you say you had someone to support you, because that's one of the things that is very necessary. I had a stint of time where I was full range entrepreneurship, and it's probably the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life.
Yes, it is.
and I've dipped my way back over to the other side. But talk a little bit about what it is that you do. So the Purpose Professor is your business where you are educating, you are teaching. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so again, having transitioned into entrepreneurship, never had a plan for it. And let me even go back and say this. While I was on my sabbatical, that's what I'm gonna call it.
I like
It came
it.
to it came to me it came to me that why don't I just try working for myself?
Hmm.
Why don't I just try it? So I initially started off wanting to coach college students because again, my love has always been and will always be helping college students. Wanted to do some coaching and just some motivational speaking, and I was just going to be the purpose professor because I was going to help people figure out their purpose. And kind of kept again the evolving thing. I didn't have a plan when I left because the plan was to go back to work after a year, but not to go into business. So I've had to learn everything from the ground up. I said I've been in my look a self-taught MBA program for the past couple of years. So got to that point like, well, speaking, it has to be more than just speaking. How do I promote myself? How do I market myself? So let me change paths again and let me just do some empowerment stuff and some free gigs. And it kind of kept just a bunch of stuff. It started a podcast that I was very inconsistent about. And because I'm just like, well, I don't know what to do with all these things. Had hunger hit me up. So this really was my first year. But again, I was on a break anyway. So, no pressure.
Right.
So then I got to a point where my homegirl reached out. She's like, hey, let's do an empowerment tour. And, I'll do my thing as an author. You do your thing as a speaker. Let's put ourselves on. I'm like, yeah, bet, let's do it. But as I continued to evolve, I realized what I was after for folks, for people I wanted to serve, was personal development.
Hmm.
And that personal development has always been very strong for me. But I'm like, oh, well, wait, I want to do this with college students as well. So kind of pushing into the next year, ended up going to a couple of speaking engagements and doing essentially personal development topics and workshops, and not realizing that's what it was. But it also eventually led me to the first generation
Hmm.
aspect, because I kept thinking to myself, so a lot of this has been evolving and trying stuff and failing hard, and then trying again, because you got to figure out what works. So fast forwarding, got to a place where I realized, oh, I want to do workshops, and I'm going to start podcasting more. And I'm going to do this podcast. I'm going to make it about first gens and their experiences, our experiences after we graduate, to help other people navigate. So the podcast came to be, the motivational speaking thing came to be, and I wrote a book in between all of that. So none of this was, again, a strategic plan, because I hate for people to make it say, oh, it was so perfect and I had this. Mine has been, you're going to figure it out. So if you ask me, what do I do? People, I say, well, it's my goal to inspire, empower, and uplift first gens. And I do that through podcasting and motivational speaking. So those are my two primary things, under my business, the Purpose Professor, because I went from being a sole proprietor to an LLC when I
Uh-huh.
learned more about legal structures and just how to make things work better, how to be taken more seriously, how to do my taxes, move my money. So
That's
these things,
important.
yes, ma'am. So these things came with time. So I would say, it's been an evolution. But to answer your question, I still do many things. I teach, of course, also with the Nine Lab, and right now it's on personal development and how to figure out what you want to do with your life once you graduate from college, how to go forth and live a life that you will love. And I sometimes hate using that language because we're all using it, but that's just what it is. And also starting to teach classes around entrepreneurship and podcasting. So how to start those two things and what to do next, what steps to take, what tools do you need? Because I had to figure out so much of my own, and I know that other people like myself who are doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And I just want to help. I want to help everybody.
I love it. Well,
Thank you.
you sound like, I think most of the people who I do talk to, there are very few people that I speak to, not just on this podcast, but just in general. I know when I jumped out into entrepreneurship, it was not a plan either. I was working for about 4 years at an institution of higher education as well in PR. And I was actually just looking for the next job, and it wasn't coming along as quickly as I thought. And so I said, well, I'll
Hmm.
go into business for myself in the meantime while I'm looking. And it turned into like 4 years.
Wow.
But yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from, and it evolved as well. So I'm so glad that you are continuing to be transparent and sharing that story, because it does happen like that sometimes. And I'm sure really great stories come out of people who are very organized and planned and can see the vision way years ahead. But most of us are just kind of like learning and figuring out as we go. So I appreciate your transparency on that part.
Oh gosh, you're so welcome. And it does no good to try to paint a pretty picture.
Right.
When it's kind of messy, because like you said, a lot of us don't. Because I didn't grow up with the mindset of, oh, I need to be in business, I need to be an entrepreneur, build wealth. For me, it was more so I'm always going to be in education. Once I figured it out, I'm going to be a college president. It's the reason why went on and got this doctorate in higher ed, because I'm like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. But I found joy in entrepreneurship, a joy that I had not found. I would say working in higher ed. And I don't think it was a joy because of, I'm away from students, because no. It was more so that I found the freedom that I needed to exist in this world and to do good work, but to also serve the people who I care about most. And that's what really hit me and really pushes me to keep going forward in what I'm doing.
I love it. That's awesome. So again, you've talked a little bit about, of course, you're a first generation college student that has evolved to be your focus and somewhat niche. But why do you find it so necessary to share those stories and share how first generation college students can navigate, and specifically through your podcast?
Ooh, I love this question. Man, we're overlooked. And people think that once you get a degree, that you're good to go.
Yeah.
Oh, you got your college degree. You're good. You're good. You're smart. You got money. Yeah, so many assumptions. And there's so many levels of diversity within higher education. Socioeconomic class is one of them, but also academic status, being that of your families, is another. So there's these intersections of who a person is when they're in school, and once they graduate, that truly changes the trajectory of their life. It changes what they become and how they can become. So again, you think because a person has a college education that they're good, that they're set. But what do you do when that same person has these obligations to family, to take care of their families, to be a very deep, integral part of their families, so where sometimes they don't even want to move out the state because of family?
Right.
What do you do when people are throwing shade or making it challenging because, oh, you think you smarter, you think you better? There's these identity shifts that comes along with being first generation and educated that people don't necessarily see. And then we as first gens experience them, not all negative, but we experience some true hardships between these different worlds that we're navigating, even as professionals, that isn't so obvious to others, so we don't really know how to navigate always. So we're just kind of doing what we can do. I think that's why there's so many, for lack of better words, come up stories, right? Because of there being individuals who haven't gone before us to show us the way. Now we're trying to figure it out and also navigate these identities that we have. That's, oh, I now have a career. I'm not necessarily blue collar. Now I'm white collar. So what does that mean? And how I handle myself in the workspace? Or what does this mean as a first gen, as I'm navigating school and I have to work and take care of my mama, and I have to do other things that makes me not able to engage more in school, or even I'm gonna just go there, Greek life. Man, I'm first generation. I know nothing about Greek life. And so I'm trying to figure this stuff out, and it's new to me. But now all of a sudden I'm being looked at awkwardly because I don't know what I want to do or how I want to do it. But I didn't come up with, oh, I always know I'm gonna be a Delta. And so these things can be very, very challenging to get through. And so it makes a lot of people kind of hermit. So long answer to that short question, but it's because we're overlooked, and somebody needs to say, I see you and I believe in you and I want to help you.
I love how what you're doing with the First Gen Lounge and, HBCU podcast, we all kind of tie together because we're, sharing some of the same experiences, but you guys are delving a little bit deeper on your podcast by helping people navigate. Because I just kind of tell you and highlight the really great things. This is why you should go here. And now you're saying, once you go here, this is how we can help you navigate from place to place, whether it be Greek life, whether it be financial aid, whether it be getting into that first career. So I love it. All
right, man, let me tell you, oh, look at the connection. Hey, man, I love that. That's really dope. That's really dope.
Yeah. So as a fellow podcaster, because I was recently having this conversation with my friend Rob, who graduated from Claflin. You were recently on his podcast, From My Experience podcast. And we were just talking about what we have enjoyed so far about being podcasters and what have we found challenging. So what have been your kind of ebbs and flows when it comes to this medium called podcasting?
Ooh, start with the ebb and the flow. Because people like, oh, that people again, outside looking at it, looks so easy, right?
Right.
Let me say this though. I love that because of this medium, I have the ability to reach people all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's powerful in the sense that here we are as people who, come from first generation backgrounds. For me in particular, to come from a place where I never really even imagined what my life would look like outside of this place until my life started happening. So I went off to college and went to grad school and all these things. So to think that I, was a little girl from the valley, to having a voice that stretched because of this podcast to South Africa, to Italy, to China, to Mexico. And I'm thinking, who's listening? Like who did this? But to know that that's possible and to know that there's a space in the world for those of us who are first generation to have a voice and to be related to globally, that's been powerful for me. That is the joy. That's what keeps me going, because I know we who are telling our stories are making a difference and helping somebody to live better and be more inspired because we share. The part of it that is challenging sometimes is finding guests.
Yeah.
Being able to identify first gens. And because here's the thing, people who tend to identify as first generation are those who are first generation Americans. There are not a lot of first generation Americans, first generation to college, meaning, of course, now that their parents have a 4-year degree, that know or understand. So there's still a whole lot of education that needs to happen. And so when I'm looking for people to come onto the show, even when I was saying before, hey, are you first gen? Oh, no, I'm not first gen. My brother went to school, or my cousin went to school. I'm like, did your parents go to school?
Right.
Oh, no, well, you're first gen. So, and it's like, what? Oh, my gosh. So the light bulb comes on. And so I'm like, you haven't been tripping your whole life or, through school as a professional. Like, there are really some challenges there that you're not, again, you're not experiencing by yourself. So finding the folks, and then also the marketing. For some time was challenging for me, only because I've had to find the language so that I'm attracting the right people to it, and really having to lean on my higher ed community to be able to help push this, because people don't look at this and say, oh yeah, I'm first gen,
right?
Unless again they are first generation Americans. So those are my bigger things.
So something really cool, and I think you've been doing a really great job at marketing as well. I loved your website, and it has tons of information just to follow you along on your journey, whichever path you decide to follow you along on. So one of the things I saw that you had that a percentage of your net profit goes towards helping first generation college students, entrepreneurs, and et cetera. So how did you come up with doing that, and exactly in what avenues are you dispersing those profits?
Thank you. So for me, I knew as an entrepreneur, and I learned this early on, but it's just, how do you do something with it, right? I knew that I never wanted to have all the money. I wanted to be able to make a difference in my community, and though I have a nonprofit as well, I'll just be really stale. Because my for-profit, the Purpose Professor, picked up more, and it was moving quicker, a little less red tape, to be very for real. But I knew that so I've always had this helping component. So 9% of net profits go toward helping, again, like you said, first generation college students, graduate students, and those who aspire to be entrepreneurs, which is broken down into 3%, 3%, 3%. And that looks like scholarships. That looks like money if they're having hardship, they need to pay their light bill or, part of their rent. If they're in need, that I'm like, well, I have the money for it, then, hey, here you go for this. And then the other part of that going towards, book scholarships, or if you're starting your business, how can I help you with your business? It might be business cards. It might be money for your website. And how I've been doing that, and this is the first time I've said this out loud, is truly it's been within my network and talking to other people and sitting down. People may reach out every now and then, hey, I need money for this, I need money for that. So I have this little pocket of money set aside to where I'm aware I'm able to fund those things for those students, or for those entrepreneurs, because it's important as an entrepreneur, and I really call myself a social entrepreneur,
Uh-huh.
to be able to invest in other people's dreams in ways that people could not invest in mine. And so, yeah, that's what it is. That's how it works. I'm looking to have a more formal process in the coming years, especially as the platform grows and I have more people coming in to this business. And what I mean by that, learning about it, wanting to be sponsored for things and to have monies, and I have a more formal process. Right now, it's really case by case. And then also, everyone that I hire or contract out to work for me, they're also first generation.
Nice.
So that's something that, like my current support specialist, so I do have somebody, people like, what? I have somebody who works for me virtually. Yes, guys. She's first generation, and my podcast editor, he's also first generation. And so being intentional about who I hire, because everything for me is about giving back to those who share a similar story.
That is awesome. Yeah. Congratulations. I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I recently was somewhere, I can't remember, where was I, in Atlanta, and we were at a workshop, a friend and I, and there was a speaker there who was just, talking about capital and just talking about, how we're able to fund stuff. And he was really talking on the, startup end. But I love when people have, a much more succinct way of doing it. And one of the things he mentioned too is how a lot of the people who actually have the capital don't necessarily look like us. So it's always great to hear when people do have capital, because essentially that is what it is, and how you're able to pour that back into the same community that you come from, whether it's Black, whether it's white, your niche community, which is entrepreneurs and first generation students. So I love that.
I appreciate it a lot. And you're right about that capital piece, because everything that I'm doing is self-funded. So some days look better than other days. But hey, that's the ebb and flow of entrepreneurship, right? Absolutely. And then I think the other thing is being intentional about what you're doing, because when I make money, just like they say, pay yourself, I'll pay myself, and I'll put money aside for those initiatives. And then I'll just be, again, very, very transparent. I'm not making $1 million yet. That's the goal one of these days.
Amen.
But of course, okay, say it again, say it, amen.
Amen.
So for what it's worth, I am in a place where I do what I can for whom I can. And for whom I can't, I make sure that I still keep them in the fold and keep them engaged with the work. Because if I don't have the means, I know somebody who does, who is willing to help. And I'm grateful for the many people who stand behind me and who are always like, whatever you need, I got you. And they really mean that. So it's just a matter too of, like you said, if you can help somebody, help them. If you can help them, because we get more by giving, and that'll never change.
I love that. Now, you mentioned, you said 9%, right?
Yes.
Okay, so 9%, and then you also have the 9 lab. So does the 9, does the number hold some significance with you, or it just happens to be?
It sure does. I'm in a sorority. And, I'm a Delta Sigma Theta sorority, Incorporated.
Yeah.
And I'm a number 9 on my line.
Shut it. So am I.
No, you're not. Shut for real. Oh my God, what's up, club? Okay, so look, I love to be the 9. Listen, I'm obsessed with 9. So beyond what 9 means in our sorority, because numbers mean a lot in all of our sororities, and fraternities and stuff. It's what 9 represents in general. So 9 is the highest single digit number. So before you start over, you got to get to 9. So it's a sign of new beginnings. It takes 9 months to birth a child, in a healthy situation. So even thinking about, it's 9 months for life. And so even when you think so much greater what 9 is. And also September, ironically, is the only month with 9 letters in it. But it's also the beginning of fall in September, which is also one of my favorite seasons. So again, in the fall, everything dies to come back to life. But even in its death, the trees, the leaves fall off, they change colors. There's a beauty that we have to look at, we have to see before there's this transition in the spring. Because I know winter is just stale. So I love numbers. and I love looking at the deeper meanings of things. So
Yeah.
again, beyond sorority, when I figured out, oh gosh, I'm number 9, and it just kind of kept going over life, I started learning about stuff, and then I got married in September as well. So it's just really cool that 9 is just a strong number for me,
Uh-huh.
and so it's representative of those things, and I just carry it through all the things that I do. That's why.
You better come on. Look, now I'm about to now I'm about to take a few tidbits and be like, "Yep, so 9. Here's what it
So
is."
9. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And then even think about this, like people say you dress to the nines, like that means you fly. So
Right.
it's just, it's just so many things with it. But if people like, if you study numbers a little bit, like you could see those things. But that's funny. I am so excited that you're a 9. Like, oh my gosh, like it just takes you to another level in my head.
Right. I am. Yeah, that is awesome. And then you graduated from Shaw in 2009 too?
2009. Yep. And
Look
actually
at you.
May 9th of 2009.
Get
9 is
out
my
of
lucky
here.
number.
It
Yep.
is. It sounds like it. Yeah,
Yeah.
before I decided, because I have two, I don't know if you can have two lucky numbers, but before I became the 9, my birthday is the 8th. So everything was like the 8th, 888. And then now it's 9. And those are the two that I'm always like, it's a sign. But see,
Yeah, right. I love it, and then it is like really crazy that you say that, because for you to even have caught that, I'm like, people don't really catch that. Like, you got to be on to something. That's why you special, because you caught that. Because I mean, people can see it, but they don't. Because even on my social media, I put Delta Sigma Theta, I put 9, Charlotte 10, or 704, whatever I put, and then 9, because 9 is that connector as well. So that's something else that I'd even share with you. How I've had the ability to connect with people across Greek life has been finding people who share the same number. So finding my clubs, and it just makes it's a connection, immediate connection. So I'm like, oh, you a 9? I'm a 9. What's up, 9? And I would have a whole 9 club if I could help it. But I have in every organization, I know somebody who's a 9, but I try to show love. And then to my clubs at that, because it's just about the like I said, the unity and the connection. And so it's harder to start a conversation with an ace. Not saying I couldn't, but it's like, oh, but you're a 9, I'm an ace. Oh, okay, cool. Like,
right.
Got to be fine to be a 9,
Come on now. So while we're in the number vein, we'll talk a little bit about your book, which is titled 1865. So if you could tell us a little bit about your journey to become an author, the title of your book, and what it's all about.
Yeah, so again, 1865 is about numbers, right? Love numbers. And the book is really about overcoming adversity and navigating the early stages of adulthood. And what that looked like is I'm essentially telling parts of my story, tell you about my upbringings, and then I get to the college phase of my life, and I leave the reader with lessons learned around relationships, around picking a major, around overcoming the adversity with self-love and weight and self-advocacy and friendships. So I talk about several things in the book, because I realized when I was writing it, and I was actually on tour when I wrote it, and my friend was like, yeah, when you gonna write your book? And I'm like, I don't know. I ain't writing no book. Never. If I'm ever gonna do a book, it's gonna be a book of poetry. But I remember toward our last stop, it was September. I guess or something about September. I started thinking about, okay, I should go ahead and write a book. So let me think about what I'm going to do. And I want to say around the last week of September, early October, I took 2 days off, and this is where it gets insane. Took 2 days off, and I just wrote for 2 days. And I wrote to my collegiate self. I wrote to the young woman that needed to hear what I had to say about some of the things I experienced. So it's really an empowerment, inspirational piece to a current college student, though people across life stages have evidently gotten something from it, which is exciting. But it's to really to give you the juice, the fulfillment, that you need. It's hard to put it into words that you need to continue to just really press forward in your journey, because it's hard when you don't know how. And I believe in sharing the stories and telling what you've been through and being real about it to help somebody else get through what they're going through. Because none of this life is for us. I truly believe it's for the people who we're meant to serve. And so in that, like I said, I spent 2 days writing it. in roughly 2 months, going back and forth with my editors about it. And it's like, well, 2 days, full-time entrepreneur. I was on tour, so I had 2 days to write. And my husband would cook for me and bring me dinner. He wouldn't bother me. He just let me write. And I outlined it, but I woke up at like 3 o'clock in the morning and I was like, oh my God, that's it. And I just started writing and just would not stop. And then I was like, dang, I got a whole book. So the process was interesting because it wasn't, again, something that I knew I was going to do in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Although now I am thinking more strategically about when I want to release my next book. I'm actually hoping the end of this year. But we're going to pray about that, but like definitely for the end of this year, because it's time to say something else to the next group or to the next young person who I used to be, for lack of better words.
Yeah. Now, I'm glad that you said that your book was all about your college self and how, you were writing to yourself and just giving people the opportunity to know about life navigation, obstacles, challenges, etc. So we're going to talk a little bit about college life. Of course, this is the HBCU podcast, and we want to talk a little bit more about the lovely University Shaw. Now, in 2009 is when you graduated, but what was young Eve like on the campus in Raleigh, North Carolina?
Oh, Lord. When she arrived, she was loud and screaming out windows, playing the music so everybody can hear who's walking on the street, all over the place on the yard, getting to know everybody. She was somebody initially who wanted to be seen and wanted to be heard. Mm-hmm. Not because she always had something to say, to be honest. It's because she wanted to feel noticed and accepted. Mm-hmm. And that turned into having been pulled to the side by a couple of amazing people, some seniors and some faculty, some staff, who really started to say, what are you trying to do? What do you got going on? And then I started to tone down a whole lot because I realized that I was in college, but you start this new identity. I'm away from home. You get to recreate yourself.
Right.
But I ended up getting very involved through student government. Like I said, I ended up pledging, which I was really excited about. As a student ambassador. So I ended up being in leadership roles, which actually felt very natural for me, mm-hmm. and ended up finding my fit across campus. And I was an academic. I went to school on a full academic scholarship. So that's nice. The other thing that's really interesting, that yes, Black school, private school, and I went on a full scholarship. So to have had that, and it still feels unbelievable now that I'm saying it, like, God, that really happened. To have been believed in to where I didn't see my own potential, to have other people see it and invest in me to help me to become the woman that I am today. And I stayed busy. I lived on campus. I ended up working at the General Baptist State Convention, which was across the street from my alma mater. Uh-huh. And I had, I think, some of the best mentors in the world. Had one of the greatest presidents, for the time in which I was at my institution. But loved the band, loved homecoming. My gosh, loved homecoming. I loved everything about being a Black person, being a Black woman, but also having this element to me that I didn't have to hide or repress, and that being somebody who loved trap music. You know what I'm saying? Like I could very well be educated, and we could be talking about W.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington and education and gentrification and all kinds of things, and then turn around and go listen to Boosie. And it was like totally, but it was all me, and I didn't have to feel like I never
side eyes, weird. No weird looks.
Yeah, I didn't have to hide. I didn't have to feel like, is this okay? And to be around great Black people was very rewarding. And so by the time that I left, I was stronger, more confident. My character had built. I knew that I was loved, and I was mission driven, mm-hmm. when I left Shaw. And I realized that pursuing purpose was always going to be greater than pursuing a fact check. Although a fact check is, very much so appreciated. It was doing something meaningful in this world. So because I went to an HBCU, they helped me step into myself. And I did it in an environment that never made me feel like I was an outlier.
Let's talk a little bit about you pledging, and when did that come about, and how did you know that Delta Sigma Theta was the sorority for you?
Oh man. So and I talk openly about it now, and I'm actually, this is one of the first time I'm talking about it, in such a public forum.
Mm-hmm.
But going to school again, I didn't have people in my family who were Greek, so I didn't know what the heck a delta was from a HG or anything for that matter. It all looked the same to me. And so deltas actually weren't on my campus at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, okay, well, whatever. So I looked and I had to read. I had to do a lot of research. And when I started realizing I shouldn't talk to my classmates about being Greek or what they were doing or what stuff meant, because it's a very real part, of being at an HBCU, like that comes back. Like I was hurt by that,
Especially
because
a small one.
yeah, especially a small one, because one day I was like, maybe I should do Alpha Kappa Alpha, maybe I should do Zeta. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, and I talked to my RA about it, and just hey, I'm trying to figure it out, but it's this code, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is black code. You don't talk about it, you just do it, and like you don't go to several interest meetings, you just go to that one. But I'm like, nobody told me this, and ain't nobody Greek in my family, so how y'all expect me to know?
Right.
And actually, a really good friend of mine, we didn't talk for a long time because at one point I thought I was going to do one thing and decided to do another, so it doesn't make me. And this is what I truly believe at this point. And for the people who are afraid to say it, I'm just going to say it for us. It doesn't make you a bad person because you had to figure it out because you didn't grow up with something in your blood. Now I'm the blood, to pass it down.
Right.
So I say that to say it was research, having to learn about the sororities and what they did, having to watch the women, the ones I was able to watch. And actually at the time, we didn't have two organizations on our campus. And so, Delta, and I think the other one was SGRO. So I was just trying to figure out, like, okay, what fit? How do I know? And one day, an alum actually reached out to me and was like, hey, I think you're supposed to be a Delta, right? So you just need to do this tour. And I was like, what? Because what do you mean I'm supposed to be a Delta? Because even so, Deltas would come to homecoming. So it was a part of it. They would come to homecoming. And this is the one I started to realize that I was so fascinated with this one group.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be, they weren't on campus, but I'm like, who are these women? Oh my God, who are y'all? Y'all are, what is this, a chapter? What's that?
Right, tell me more.
Yeah, that's it. But I was just around them, and then, I got to do a college tour for a graduate chapter in the area. And then later on, the women brought me in to thank me at their end of the year celebration, and I got an award from them because I really went out my way to make sure they had a good time, not even thinking anything about pledging, because I'm like, well, at this point, I guess it ain't gonna happen, or I don't know what I'm doing no way, and it costs money. I ain't got no money. But fast forwarding, it ended up being this thing to where I was at this particular banquet, and I thought, holy crap, I want to do this. I think I would really like to do this sorority. This one is the one that feels right to me. And then I started to find other people. So, I had to find people off campus who were. And then they announced one day, magically, that they were bringing a line back. And I was like, you know what? That might be a sign. I'm going to go. So there were over 130 something of us at this interest meeting.
Uh-huh.
And so come on, we're a small campus. It's like 3,000 of us at school.
Right.
And so that's a whole lot of people to be in an interest meeting. And of that group, 22 of us made the line, and I happen to be the number 9. So I say today, and people talking about pledging and how we brought back, and I know this is a very sensitive conversation, but I definitely believe that for me, what happened was beyond my control, for why we weren't on campus. But then being in the sorority, being active, being financial, something I've definitely committed myself to, and doing the work, the good work of Delta. But it was knowing that it felt right, and I didn't have to question or, think too much about it when it finally hit that, oh my gosh, I love these women and I want to be a part of their history. I want to be a part of the history of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And so, that's my story. It's the first time I told it out loud, which is
right here on the HBCU podcast.
Yeah, because it's real, and it's so real. It's so real because everybody has this. Oh, I always knew. No, I didn't.
Right.
I didn't, and I hate that there's so many of us who are suffering because of the association with. You go to campus and people get blackballed because they was at such and such meeting. They ain't know no better, but there's no forgiveness for it. So that's even a part of that first gen, journey for some of us, a lot of us actually, that we just got to do better. And thankfully for faculty and staff who are more mature and really understood that she don't know no damn better. Excuse me, but she don't know better. They were able to help guide me a little bit more and help teach me more. Because I'm thinking, wow, had it been for some of my peers, I would have never known the greatness of Greek life and have been a part of this amazing history because of this unforgiveness that you gotta know, you gotta be. Right. Okay. But I know I chose right, and I've never regretted it a day in my life.
And I don't know if in 1865 is a little bit of that in there, but I'm so glad you mentioned it because I had the same experience, first person in my family who's Greek. Luckily, when I got to Claflin at our, we had something called the freshman college, and they just kind of like, wrapped their arms around us, told us everything about being a freshman, gave us the warning signs, and it happened. We had classes that we took throughout the entire freshman year, but I remember Miss Cheryl Ponder, who is also a member of Delta Sigma Theta, and she made very clear all of the things you just mentioned, and she was kind of giving us a little bit of a warning because she knew most of us probably were first generation college students. They didn't know any better, and she just kind of was like, listen, these are the things you don't do. These are the signs that you don't mock, you don't copy. They just kind of gave us this whole kind of Greek 101 thing coming in as freshmen, because if you've never been around that particular type of life and environment, you have no idea. You think it's something you could jump in and jump in the line and copy what they're doing, and it's like, no, that's not how this goes.
Now I feel like I knew better about that though, but you're right. There are a lot of people who act up, a whole act up. You be like, whoop. Can't believe you did that. But you're right, and I'm glad y'all had that, especially on your campus. And I said over time, I was fortunate to have people to talk and help me understand more about Greek life. And when I learned the historical significance, because I'm a big history person, I love history, especially Black history, then that made me even more attracted to what it was. But even so, I can't ever think of like some of the codes, you don't wear this color, you don't do that, you don't do these things. Like, people let you look stupid. I'm just gonna be real. And then when you look at crazy, you're like, oh, I didn't know I was looking crazy. But I did have some great mentors. That's the other thing I loved about the mentors I ended up having that were especially Greek, no matter, because one of my most significant mentors actually was an AKA. And she was like, I think you might like Delta too, though. You should just definitely check that one out. And it's like they weren't pushing me to it, but they caught what I was saying about things. And, this has become a longer the conversation I thought it would. But I think because it's such a sensitive thing that I feel like I've had to hide, because we as Greeks are not so sensitive a lot of times about these things, or we don't talk about it because then we look funny, you know what I'm saying? We look like, well, you ain't really for real what you are. I'm like, well, let me tell you, I know my history front and back.
Exactly.
I know a whole lot. Like, it's a lot of things I can tell you that you probably can't. There are things that don't say anything to me now, and you still ain't financially active. Like, and that's not to be funny, but my thing is, if I'm doing the work, then I'm doing the work. And then you realize how, again, and gosh, you're like, oh gosh, it's so sensitive. You realize how in the grand scheme of things, it's about being a good sorority sister,
right?
Being a good sorority member and doing the work. If I'm doing the work, I ain't really tripping off of what happened for me, how I came in, or what happened for me to get here. I'm doing the work.
It's null and void. Absolutely. They're all service organizations. And at the end of the day, if you're not doing the service of the sorority, then like, what are you doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Sometimes we add a little bit more drama than necessary, but I don't think it's that we mean it, but we're just protectors of what's ours.
Absolutely.
But I'm like, protect it for the right reasons. But you see people who can do work, and that's why I'm grateful for the women who brought my chapter back, because had it not been for them, my chapter would not exist right now. And my chapter has a strong, very beautiful history. And I'm like, I thank God I'm a part of it, because we are the oldest at our institution. And so at Shaw Delta we established in 1934. There's not a lot of old chapters out there.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, right. So my thing is like, I'm a part of something bigger, and I'm still a part of that legacy. And what I do with my life now speaks to who I am, but what that chapter has done for me because of what those women, what they saw for me to be a part. Man, look, it's all about the work. That's all. It's all about the work. I can put my tags on my car and wear my shirt, no problem. And when I say that, because like I pay my dues, and I'm a part of a chapter. I've been as long as I've been in the sorority, and I'm good with it.
Now, I think that's also a really great segue. We're talking about service and everything. And here on the HBCU podcast, I always like to talk about giving and what giving looks like. So, You, as an alum, as a proud alum, what does giving back to Shaw University look like for you?
Well, I'm actually currently the Vice President of Young Alumni Relations for our National Alumni Association.
Yay,
So, giving,
congratulations.
thank you, thank you, thank you. So, I've been in this role since October 2018. And so, giving for me has become about giving of my time through my commitment to such an organization. It is showing up to mentor students. It is being a part of activities when the university has something they're looking for people to come out and support. Is doing that, but more than anything, and people y'all don't want to hear it. It's about giving the money, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Giving the money because our institutions, especially our small private institutions,
Yes.
they need the financial resources to be able to withstand the times. And it's no time to be out here talking about someone like, ain't do nothing for me, or I had to do. You got that degree, didn't you? And that degree is enabling you to be able to take advantage of opportunities that otherwise you wouldn't have been able to have without it. That degree is doing something for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the thing that people tend to misunderstand is that it's not that a degree magically makes things happen. That's what
Right.
they get wrong in their head. And that's something I actually understood before I graduated. I don't know how, but it's not the degree that just makes $60,000 come into the door, $100,000, $200,000. It's building the networks, is being able to build your own skills. So personal development, professional development, going to conferences, reading books, listening to podcasts, subscribing to blogs, is doing things to continue to grow yourself. And then making this degree work for you was a qualifier, and that's what people misunderstand. So I give to my institution because I want for those individuals who will be graduating to have as beautiful of an experience professionally and personally as I believe that I've had. And so the time, the energy that's spent is given back to the community, because the other thing people have to realize is the students believe in what they can see.
Mm.
Kind of like now a young black man, a young boy, 5, 6, 7, 8, believes he can be president of the United States because Barack Obama ever exists. He can see that,
Right.
and that makes it real. So, in what I'm doing now is trying to be the example. And Tyler Perry said last night, and Lord, I have been stuck on this since I heard it a couple hours ago. But it's not my goal to be an icon, but to be an inspiration. I was like, oh my gosh. Because
He
that's the
was
thing.
speaking with the truth out
Listen,
there.
okay, man, had me laid out when I heard that. I was like, wow, because that's just true, that we have to, as alum, position ourselves for the students to see us so they know what potential our institutions have.
Mm-hmm.
We talk a lot about Morehouse and Spelman and Howard, and FAMU as some of the flagships. I mean, A&T, we can go on and on, the flagship institutions of HBCUs. But here's something that I believe that often their alumni get, that some of us who have had different experiences or come from smaller schools don't necessarily get. They feed into each other.
Mm-hmm.
They feed into their networks, and they support each other, and they push each other up, and then they go back and they show students what's possible, and they show students what they can do and who they can be, and students want to aspire to that, and that pushes into graduation. So the higher ed in me just got excited that you asked, because as an alum, there's so much we can be doing, but there's no reason the doors to our institution should be closing. Now, and we have the power to make something happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. And I love that you mentioned that you're involved with your National Alumni Association. I actually met your former president before, I think, Ioka.
Yes! And my big sister, I love her.
She was very nice at UNCF conference, and
Yes.
you guys have a pretty strong alumni base too, because at that particular conference, I think it was in Atlanta, they were doing a meet and greet at one of the hotels, or just like a mixer, and we all ended up, all of us from just various HBCUs ended up over there at your mixer, and it was really fun and it was nice. So I love to hear that you're involved, and I love for more people to get out there and get involved in. I hear a lot of people, especially sometimes with our smaller schools, our alumni base sometimes does show older, but that's only because we're just not, getting involved. So I'm always happy to see just younger people just jumping in there, and it's like, be the change you want to see. You want to see more
Yes.
mixers. You want to see more fun things geared towards you. Well, maybe it's you who has to come in and make it happen. So,
You said that. I absolutely believe that, like, fully. And then in my role working with young alum, like, that's what I'm specifically after.
mm-hmm,
Um, I would even say being able to help students, current students, because I'll be working with current students for pre-alumni council, and then again those recent college graduates. Is being able to cater to what they need as an alumni association. So what does that group need, and being able to deliver. So for me, my platform right now is built around personal professional development
mm-hmm.
for students who are about to graduate and recent alum. Because if y'all are saying to me that you need jobs and you need connections and you need money, financial resources or resources, period, then to help you become a more engaged alum, I should be able to deliver something to you that is going to help benefit your life. Not that you're just giving me money, because in exchange, if this is helping you, you're going to be able to help and give back.
Right.
So I think too, we have to focus a little bit more too as associations on giving back to our people before expecting them to give.
A word. We can talk all day
Look,
about
business has
that.
taught me something. Business has taught me something.
Absolutely. And it's amazing that you are using it to go back and benefit your alma mater. So if you could encourage a student to go to an HBCU or Shaw, your particular HBCU, what would you say?
I would say that college, undergraduate years specifically, will be the most amazing 4 years of your life. And there's no better way to spend it than in an environment that is going to nurture your mind, your body, and your soul. One in which you don't have to look over your shoulder because you are black. One that you don't have to be challenged because you like trash. Oh, look at me. I love using my pointing tool. One that you don't have to feel like you have to be anything other than who you are, because showing up as you are is good enough. And they will take that and they will help you to become a more refined, even stronger, even more vibrant version of who you are for the rest of the world to see. So walk in your greatness, but there's no other space than an HBCU space where you can exist in a world of other Black scholars, of other Black leaders, and of Black excellence like there is at an HBCU.
Woo! Come on now. You heard it here from Dr. Eve now.
Look.
What is coming up for you? What should we be on the lookout for? How can people get in contact with Dr. Eve?
Well, be on the lookout for more podcasting initiatives. So, again, I have the First Gen Lounge where I have these open conversations with other first generation graduates. That comes out every Thursday at 9 o'clock p.m. I really want more people to get engaged with this, and even so to get onto my mailing list so they can keep up with my work. And by doing that, you can go to my website, which is www.thepurposeprofessor.com, and look around, check out the book, just become engaged. And then my thing is to tell other people who can benefit, because we as a community, we have to take care of each other. So I'm saying, if you know somebody who's a first gen, be it that they're a current student or about to go to college or just finished, they have a community that they can get engaged with, one that will support them, uplift them, help them be better versions of themselves, the best version of themselves. So yeah, just get connected with that platform, and that'd be great.
Awesome. So if you guys missed anything, don't worry. You'll be able to find all the links, all the social channels that Dr. Eve shared in our episode description area, as well as on the HBCUpodcast.com. So don't worry about all that. Dr. Eve, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Natasha, for having me. Thank you for the work that you do, for your brilliance, for your vision, and for you walking the walk with this podcast, because it's a lot of work, and to keep bringing awareness to our illustrious institutions in a day where people are saying we're not relevant. I thank you for saying that we are. But thank you for having me here, and I'm wishing you nothing but the best in all that lies ahead.
Thank you so much. Okay, so you guys, again, find us at the HBCUpodcast.com, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at the HBCU Podcast. That's it for us. Dr. Eve, thank you again. Thank you so much for listening to the HBCU Podcast. We have so much more HBCU content on the way, so make sure you subscribe to the podcast, rate the podcast, and visit us at thehbcupodcast.com. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at the HBCU Podcast. Like us on Facebook. We love you for listening. Until next time.